Hey, everybody. So good to see you today. And wow, is there stuff going on with the former president? Yet again, Donald Trump, again, getting indicted. We have to break this down. There are so many people who are so upset, and they're upset because either they're tired of hearing this guy being talked about, or they love him and they're mad, or they're angry at him and they can't wait for him to go to jail or something. There's always a problem here. And I thought I wanted to bring somebody on board who could kind of break this down for us, who's already been on TV multiple times, who's already dealt with this. He is, some of you may already know, he's on TV all the time, an excellent white collar defense attorney, a former prosecutor, and actually Harvard Law teaching faculty, the man, the myth, the legend, Vinoo Varghese. How are you, sir?
I'm great, Larry. Great to see you. It's always fun as when we.
Now, I mean, the crazy thing is, we've had these conversations about him before. This isn't the first time he's in trouble. It reminds me of, if you've ever seen the movie about Larry Flint, right? And he goes to his lawyer at one point. His lawyer's mad at him. He's like, "You're getting in trouble again. I'm so tired of you getting in trouble." And Larry says, What are you upset? I got tons of money. I'm always in trouble. You're my lawyer. Why are you mad? I feel like Trump is this guy.
That's a great way to look at life, particularly if for Larry Flint. I'm not sure if Trump necessarily feels that way. It seems like some of his public comments since this indictment have been different in a way that where he said nobody wants to get indicted. He made some comment, and I thought it was interesting, and I wonder if that's actually really fully what he said, or is it just the media blowing up certain things to say, oh, Donald Trump really feels it this time.
So you think that
maybe the latter.
So maybe he's actually changed, because it seemed like in the beginning he was almost, I mean, I think some of his people were almost excited about this. Like, yeah, just trying to get me. So you're saying maybe now this is getting to him? Do you think maybe he's afraid? Maybe he's worried now?
Look, it's hard to say. You don't know how much that's media embellishment. The way
Sure.
that I see Trump is this, and let me start off for purposes of full disclosure. I'm a never Trumper. I voted against him both times, and I think that he should have been president. I think he was a terrible president. I blame him for the lockdown.
Now you've just made half of the audience mad now. Now they don't like you anymore.
Well, they're gonna like what I'm gonna say afterwards.
Okay, good.
Because it's not about Trump. It's just about calling it balls and strikes. So what I'm saying was there were some things he did that were great. He was the first president to enact significant criminal justice reform.
Absolutely.
So like Obama didn't do that. Clinton didn't do that. I mean, Clinton actually made criminal justice reform worse, right? With tons of bipartisan support, or criminal justice worse, not criminal justice reform. So there were things that he did that I think were good. I have no problem with strong borders, build the wall, whatever, right? I had a problem with his rhetoric, and I think he
But
really
you're talking
brought the
now,
office
though.
Down.
You're talking now, regardless of whether, I mean, this is what you do. You're a defense attorney, right? You're going to defend people regardless. You're going to give them the best fair trial you can give them. You're going to try to make sure that the system works, to make a best outcome. That's what you do for a living. So obviously, in this case, even though you may not like Trump personally, you still want the guy to get fair treatment in a fair justice system. Am I right here?
Well, absolutely. And let me just add, I say these things about Trump because the larger point of all this is that, these impeachments that he had, multiple impeachments, the Democrats took their shot and they lost, right?
Right.
And then people forget, and the Republicans, the far right crowd were like, hey, the Mueller report showed that there was no Russia collusion. I said, absolutely, that's correct, because collusion doesn't exist in the United States Criminal Code, right? So what Mueller said, there was no conspiracy, but he did document about 10 or 11 different instances where Trump broke the law in terms of obstruction of justice. But he said it's up to Congress to do something about it. Congress never went after him for that.
My worry here is twofold. One, you have half of the people, at least, if not more, in America, who don't understand the law, just don't get it, right? Have no idea. So
Most
they think
people.
one of
Not just half. I would
they would
say
90%.
Yeah,
95%.
probably. Correct.
Don't get it. So they're either saying things like, well, wait a minute, isn't this double jeopardy or whatever? They think it's double jeopardy, right? Or they think, right, one or the other, well, let's just keep hitting him until he goes down. He's obviously a bad guy, so he's scamming the system. And I don't think a lot of people don't understand it, which is why I like, if you don't mind, I want to show your interview on CBS News just recently, so we can kind of break down this one, because in 5 minutes, us talking, all of a sudden you're going over to all the last stuff he did and before and the Mueller report. We're all over the place because everybody gets all over the place. It gets confusing. And I guess one of the worst pieces is now people just start saying, I don't get it. I love him, so he's innocent, or I hate him, so he's guilty. Exactly the wrong answer, right? That's the one that we don't want. We want a guy to be guilty because he's guilty, or innocent because he's innocent. We don't want I'm pissed off, so here's the end. So
he's innocent right now.
Tell me about it. What do you mean? Tell me.
Well, look, you and I have spoken about this. The fundamental point of criminal law is that someone is presumed innocent until the government can prove their guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. That can either be conviction after trial or a guilty plea. Neither of those things have happened. I mean, Trump, the impeachments were not criminal prosecution; they were quasi-criminal prosecutions, but they weren't. They were done by the legislative branch and not the executive branch, right? So
hold on. Even so, even if you look at that, and I think some people do look at that as criminal, right? I'm not saying you're incorrect. I'm saying how people look at it, right?
It wasn't a criminal proceeding.
But I'm saying people look at it that way. So they think, oh, that was his trial. But even if they do, isn't the conviction supposed to be in the Senate? So even if you were to look at that,
right?
I know that's what I'm saying.
Right.
He wasn't then. So even if you looked at that as criminal, again, if I look at it as, well, that's the same thing. If I look at it that way, still in the Senate, he wasn't convicted. So he basically went on trial and that was it.
Yeah, he beat it twice. Right. And then Mueller's thing never resulted in any indictment, any criminal indictment. And now you have these two cases, one out of Manhattan, which is, to me, a complete joke, that they even brought this case.
Right.
We can put that aside for now. And now this case is really, I mean, it's got its holes, and I can say that even before seeing the evidence. And if you play the tape, when you play the tape, you understand.
Let me play this now, if we could.
Sure.
And let me know. I can stop it. We can talk about it.
Welcome back. CBS News has confirmed former President Donald Trump has been indicted in a special counsel's criminal probe into his handling of classified documents.
First time federally.
Trump has been ordered.
Oh, hold on. What do you mean first time federally?
Well, he said he's been indicted. You said again, that's correct. But the first indictment was in the Manhattan DA's office, like 2 months ago.
Okay.
And that's a state court indictment. This is the first time, that was the first time, I believe, in U.S. history, a former president has been charged by any state. This is definitely the first time a former president has been charged by the feds.
I heard a rumor that President Grant was charged in a state for some crazy thing like, riding his horse at night or something like that. That's what I heard. I have no idea that's true.
That's why I said I'm not sure if a former president from that time, let's just make it easy. It's the first time a modern president, any living president, any president's post 1950 has been charged criminally because Nixon was never charged.
Right. Yeah, okay.
Neither was Clinton.
So thank you for that.
To appear in federal court in Miami, Florida, Tuesday for his arraignment. He has long denied any wrongdoing in the case. The charges stem from the discovery of more than 300 sensitive materials found at his Florida estate during an FBI search last August. And joining me now is white-collar criminal defense attorney Vinoo Varghese. Vinoo, lay out for us, well, how serious is this? We know it's retention of national security, defense documents, and obstruction. How serious is that?
I think this is the most serious charges that he could be potentially facing. And if I were his team, this would be the one that concerns me more than what's going on in Manhattan. The Manhattan case in state court there has numerous problems, legal issues.
You brought
the
this
fact
up
that
before.
they indicted him here means that they believe that they have enough evidence to go forward. The DOJ generally. If you can stop right there.
Yeah, go ahead.
That's the difference between state and feds, generally speaking.
Tell
the state sometimes will go forward. States, this is notorious around the country. District attorneys are, or state prosecutors, as they're known in a lot of states, they either call the office of the prosecutor or district attorneys. They are notorious for bringing prosecutions that they know they can't win. Right? So they do it for the publicity. I mean, you have numerous cases involving athletes throughout, Kobe Bryant investigations, right. Duke lacrosse people. The DA there went to jail for what he did. So there's a lot of prosecutions like this. And I don't believe the Manhattan District Attorney's Office can win that. Well, look. Let me
well, no, let's go back to federal, though.
They'll get a conviction because it's Manhattan, right? I mean, because this is overwhelmingly anti-Trump land, right?
Well, hold on. I want to cover both of those pieces, right? The idea that you say the feds. So the feds generally, you're telling me, don't bring a case unless they're sure they can get a conviction.
So in most places in this country, there are places where the U.S. Attorney's Office, the feds, the prosecuting agency acts like a district attorney's office, and they react to cases, right? So, for example, if they cover any crime on federal property or on Indian land, things like that. The whole District of Columbia, the federal protectorate, they have a separate within it a municipal section, and they have their federal section. So they on the federal side, places like when the DOJ, particularly when you're dealing with the former president, they believe, and I'm pretty sure they believe that they can get a conviction here.
Okay, hold on. Let me walk down this if I could. So You're telling me that the federal prosecutors, generally speaking, are more picky,
correct,
on the choices that they make
correct.
when it comes to bringing cases.
Yes.
Okay.
So this is a little different because this is a special prosecutor. He did not, if I understand the mandate, he did not have to seek Merrick Garland's approval. He had the authority to bring this on his own.
Got it.
But generally speaking, they're selective, much more selective about the cases they bring, and that's why their conviction rates are generally higher, usually much higher than a lot of state courts.
So with that piece in mind, right? Isn't it? I mean, you said it too, right? There's obstruction, and there's also the paperwork piece. I think there's another part to this too, which is I think Americans don't like the idea that a former president could be convicted or go to jail in theory even. I mean, I guess he could go to jail too, for like a paper crime. It doesn't feel right. It feels wrong. But again, this is common. The obstruction, the cover-up is worse than the crime, right? That's like almost, we hear this since Nixon. We always hear this. The cover-up is worse than the crime. I feel that's true in this case too. Or am I wrong?
We don't know yet, Larry. I mean, that's what the anchor John Dickerson was saying, but at the time we didn't even have the indictment, and in fact I wish I had been stronger in rebuffing him and saying, hey dude, and I did say it, look, we wait till the evidence comes out, but he was already operating from that same area that he did all this stuff, therefore isn't it bad? If you play, once you play more of the interview, you'll see. All
right, let's do that now.
You'll see my reaction as well.
Okay, let's play some more.
Move forward unless they believe they have enough. The problem for them is that this is going to be viewed as a political prosecution and in the circles that Donald Trump runs in, a persecution or continued persecution. And for them, from a factual point of view, and obviously we're just hearing this, we don't have the indictment, and we are a long way away from knowing what the actual evidence is. What's been out there so far seems to me to be questionable. And what I mean by that is you have something that really cuts in the way of politics, a political question over whether he should have kept it or not. And now now you've actually charged a former president, a person who's actually running for president again. And it's hard to stay back and look at this, or sit back and look at this and say, is this devoid of politics? That's going to be a tough question for Merrick Garland.
That is hard.
But there's definitely been a former Army, I believe it was a former Army lieutenant colonel, was just sentenced to 3 years, I believe it was, for retention of documents. So if the signature proposition of American law is that no one is above the law, if it happens to a lieutenant colonel, presumably it should also be able to happen, if the facts are proved and so forth. It should be able to happen to a former president.
On that. Facts approved.
Look, what you're saying is correct from a purely theoretical point of view, but the charging decisions are never just theoretical; they are practical. And in this case,
people have to hate that, don't they? Don't people have to hate that what you've just said is true, right? Don't people hate that? Like, I don't like how it sounds either. Like, I get it. I agree with you. I get it. But it feels terrible. Like, I don't want to believe that, oh, well, politics counts, or, I mean, how do you as a prosecutor handle that aspect without someone thinking, oh, this prosecutor is a political hack, or maybe you don't care? How do you handle that?
Well, I think there's a couple pieces here. One is the perception of politics, and that's what I was trying to say to him. I was like, listen, when these guys, when they bring a case, they have to, the special prosecutor has autonomy, is my understanding from Merrick Garland. But when they bring a case, they have to believe, or that their evidence is strong enough. So when you come at the king, you better not miss, right? So now you've just indicted the king, right? So like the guy who's not been able to be convicted at least twice by the Senate.
Teflon Don.
I've referred to him that multiple times. So, when you talk about the confidence of the public, right? Is this, a real prosecution? I don't know yet. We'll find out what the evidence says, right? And
but let me ask a personal opinion of you. Let me just finish this.
Even if you personally, let's say the evidence bears out that he, is guilty, and on a, you look at it and you can say, yes, this is a case that, meets the standard of beyond a reasonable doubt. If you're looking at this sort of objectively, but then it's still subjective because you still got to convince 12 people of that. Right? And so what's really interesting here is that you have to, in Miami, and I talk about this a little bit in the interview, is a place that Trump carried in the last election, right? So, that's sort of an interesting place why they brought it there. But we can put that aside. But every decision has some level of politics to it. Particularly the DOJ, particularly this case, you could end up having, riots. I mean, there's a lot that can.
Hold on. Pause it now.
Yeah.
Do you think?
Thank you.
All right, so we'll start again from particularly this case.
Particularly this case. I mean, there can be nothing more political than anything involving Trump, right? So the question is was this the right decision, right? Because when you look at it, classified documents, right? And just because the anchor says, well, this lieutenant colonel got convicted. I have no idea what that lieutenant colonel.
Yeah, that was kind of weird saying that. It was like I
have
felt
no
like he was
idea.
pulling at straws for that
Oh,
one.
yeah, he's totally pulling at straws. He's like, well, this guy, I don't know the facts of that case. And guess what? I don't know the facts for Trump's case. You don't either, right? Because
Yes.
we don't know what the evidence is, only what's been leaked to the media. And it sounds from what they're saying, they have problems with their case already. But, I think as this interview goes along, Larry, I think this is where it gets even more interesting.
All right, let me get back to the interview
and we'll
again.
see, and your viewers will enjoy this.
Environment, does it make sense for the Department of Justice to charge the former president, the most recent former president, and the person who's running for president again? And on top of this, you have a situation that seemed to be mishandled from the beginning by Merrick Garland. They could have made this a public thing and say, look, Mr. Trump, I'm giving you a President Trump, I'm going to give him his proper accolades as a former president, and say, we're going to give you till this date to return the documents. And then there was the execution of a search warrant. Well, they should have been clear that if you don't do it by this date, we're going to execute a search warrant on your home. They didn't say that.
But I mean,
they didn't say that the FBI is going to go in if you don't do it by this date.
But
that's a problem.
My recollection of the facts of the case is that Mr. Trump or his attorney made representations that he in fact had given everything back, and presumably those representations are going to be part of the obstruction case. And I want to ask you about a conspiracy to obstruct, which is to say not just one person and whether you think it might include multiples, but if you make representations that you don't have anything and then you keep something, that's not good. And that's not, whether you're a former president or not, you can't misrepresent. And in this case, what seems to be the highest level of classification documents, you can't misrepresent that to federal officials.
Well, again, what's been said and what was actually conveyed to his attorney and what his attorney was authorized to say, these are all things that are going to come out. And the other problem that they have is you've learned since then, President Biden had documents in his Delaware home. You've heard that former Vice President Pence had documents in his home. So when you look,
I want to cover this because this, to me, I think when I remember the comments, boy, the comments in this, they were mad at you. They were mad at you. They were not happy with this part at all. And I feel like two or three things popped up there in my view as I'm watching you talk to him. One of them was the idea that he didn't like the fact that you were saying, look, Mr. President, this is public. If you don't do it, we're going to raid your home, right? And they kind of said that, but not. His points are kind of valid when they kind of said you gotta, kind of. But you're right, it wasn't public. The problem is, and I've heard people say this, oh, he gets that and no one else does, right? No one else gets that kind of thing, right? Oh, what if he's going to hide them or blah, blah, blah. But I see your point about because he's the president or former president, right? You've got
and presumptive candidate to run again, right?
Yes, and currently running, right? And everyone knew he was going to run. Like, it wasn't like he was hiding it, right? Like, he wasn't hiding the fact he was going to run. So everybody knew. So I see your point, but I think he didn't like it. And to be forward, then a part of me doesn't like it either, right? Like, I don't like the feeling. It doesn't taste right. But I think you have a valid point, even though it doesn't taste right. Me not liking how it tastes doesn't mean it's not right, right? But I feel, I guess what I'm saying is I feel his pain. You've got to feel the pain too, right? You got to see that it doesn't feel right, that he gets that. No one else does.
I actually, look, think of it this way, all right? He's a former president. What do you get a security service detail for the rest of your life?
I don't.
No.
I deserve one, damn it. I deserve
Absolutely.
one.
There's no doubt you do, Larry. There's no doubt about that, right? I don't. Nobody else does except these former presidents, maybe some judges at some point or whatever. I forget who the Secret Service judge, but I know they cover them till they die, and they cover their family members, right? That was one of the big complaints that, Ivana Trump was flying around the world and this Trump and doing this, all this other stuff. So there has to be a level of delicacy, of softness when you're dealing with a former president, right? Because they are not the average Joe, right? So in some sense, listen, they served as president, whether you like him or not, and more than half the country or half the country thought he was great, right? I told you at the beginning of this thing that I think he was a terrible president, right? But he was still president. And therefore, he gets certain things that you and I will not get. And so when you have this situation where you're like, okay, we think you have this stuff and all this stuff, you can say to him to avoid this thing. I mean, to execute a search warrant is it's so goddamn routine for the feds because they don't give a damn about the effect that it has on the ordinary person, right? And so, I mean, if you believe in the office, and I think he violated norms, I think he was terrible, but he, so what? He did that. That doesn't give the new president or the new executive branch or the new DOJ the right to be assholes too. Right? So when you deal with him, you got to say, look, here's the deal. We understand you have this. We're going to give you to this day. If you don't, we'll take whatever actions we deem are necessary. It was not made in those kind of terms. Got it. Like they did not anticipate, the FBI just swooping in and going. I mean, that's what you do to drug dealers, right? That's what you do. Yep. Is he? A lot of people. He's a gangster, like in a rap sense, right? But he's not a gangster in a criminal sense. I mean, maybe people will argue with that and say he's this. But all I'll say is, what crimes has he been convicted of? Right? Guy hasn't been convicted of anything. Right. Okay. So until that happens, I think they should have treated him more with kid gloves.
I think that the interviewer, I think he didn't like what you were saying.
Yes.
And I think it showed, right? I think it showed he didn't like it. And again, I get it. Sometimes things don't taste right. I get it. Or maybe I don't like the guy person. I want him to go away or whatever the case may be. But I think that even in the comments, people were mad. They assumed that because afterwards you brought up what a lot of Trump supporters bring up, the whataboutism, right? What about Pence? What about Biden? What about, these other people who've had it? And the response they're going to give, and I've heard it more than once on TV, I've heard it from my friends, is, yeah, but they gave all the documents back, right? They push on the obstruction part. That's what most people who are anti-Trump, I would say, or think he's, the problem, they're going to push back and go, Vin, it's not the same. It's not the same because when Biden found out and, Pence found out, they just gave all the stuff back. Trump didn't. That's what makes him a bad guy. What's your response to that concept?
Again, I don't have all the facts of the Trump case, right? They haven't shared discovery. And discovery generally will not be shared with the public, right? It's shared between the parties. And so what I was saying, and this goes back to
discovery. Hold on, I'll make sure for those people in the audience who may not know what that is.
The evidence the government intends to use at trial, if they go to trial. They have to turn that over generally within 2 weeks of the indictment. So, and then they'll turn it over on a rolling basis as they get it if they're still acquiring stuff. But what I was saying is you have the element, and from a public point of view of this thing, like, well, yeah, Biden, Pence, whoever else, Clinton, she mishandled, she had, the whole server thing,
the
right?
Email server thing, yep.
Right. I mean, there's a whole bunch of stuff out there. And so then when you look at this and you go, okay, but they charged the guy that they've been wanting to get for so long, right? No one else has been charged. I'm not saying any of those people are guilty of crimes. I'm not saying Biden is. I'm not saying Hillary was. I'm not saying.
Let me bring this up. You mentioned the idea of politics, right?
Yep.
So this is political too, right? People are going to say, "Wait a minute, how can you charge Trump if you don't charge these guys?" Right? This is a political witch hunt.
There's an easy answer to that. Well, they can say the evidence bears out charging. In those cases, the evidence did not bear out charging, and I will actually give that deference to the Department of Justice, to any investigator. Okay. They say, listen, they didn't bring a case. So all those people that think, the Clintons murdered people and all this stuff, whoever else, I was like, where's the proof of that other than you claiming it? And I don't care if they charge Hunter Biden or charge Biden, unless they're convicted of crimes. I'm going to say they're innocent of crimes. What I was merely saying was this goes back to the point of the perception of the independence of the Department of Justice is going to be challenged.
Yes.
Right? Because of the fact that you've got these other cases out there and where supposedly people have done the same stuff. Not just like you and me, like, President Biden and Vice President Trump.
Okay.
So that was the point about that.
All right. Let me go a little further if I could.
Look at all these different things, and you got to say to yourself, is this the wisest course of action for the Department of Justice? And are they going to be able to have a jury that's going to look at the facts and not, whatever side you're on, ultimately, can you prove your case? And part of proving your case is not only whether you have charges that are sufficient to go forward, but whether you can secure a conviction. And I think that will be difficult pretty much everywhere, but in certain places in this country. But I think
I was referring to New York, San Francisco.
Bring this case.
Like that.
Yes, places that obviously hate him, right? Manhattan, oh my God, yes, sure.
Yeah, places New York, San Francisco. I mean, places like that. They'll convict Trump for eating a donut.
Yes, absolutely. Yes.
He's guilty. He should go to jail, right?
It's in Miami. I mean, that's going to be an interesting locale, and I think they have their job cut out for them to bring the case in Miami.
What
Can we pause that for a second, Larry? What I wanted to say, and obviously it's a limited interview. I also know that I'm under time constraints, right? Sometimes there'll be a guy in my ear say, "Hey, sum her up. We're going to the next, person." So I knew, I was trying to be as clear without saying, "Hey, look, Trump carried Miami last election," right? And it's not just the people in Miami, though. It's the adjoining district. So it's the Southern District of Florida. It's too much to get into in this kind of interview.
Got it.
There's a lot of people who have money. If they have money, they may be Republicans, right? And particularly in this situation, they may look at this and go, this is bullshit.
Well, I would think, this is just me from an outside looking in, right? I know most cities are blue. Miami's a blue city. However, it's probably the reddest blue city in Florida, right? As far as blue cities go, it's probably the reddest one they have, right? Sure. Plus, to your point, the suburbs are going to be redder, right? Obviously, the suburbs are going to be redder. So if you get the suburbs in the city, I feel like that's actually probably a pretty fair place to go. That probably most Republicans would agree.
I would be okay with. They clearly did not want to bring this in Tampa, which is way more red around Tampa, and so it's not just the people in Miami; it's the people around. So same thing when you bring a case in Manhattan federal court, it's the people in the surrounding areas and go Bronx all the way north to Dutchess County, right? In federal court in Manhattan to Rockland and stuff. So you're going to have a greater base of people to choose from.
So federal is way bigger than just a regular local state court.
Yep.
Got it. Okay, good. That's good to know. All right, let me go a little bit further if we could.
Sure.
Expect to happen when the former president appears in court on Tuesday?
So, this is really, really is extraordinary. He'll have to go in, and he'll be able to go in on his own. He'll get processed, and then it becomes a question whether the United States Marshals, which is the organization that will bring prisoners up into the courtroom, whether they'll give him the courtesy of going up there without being handcuffed. The thing that's different in federal court than in most state courts is that no cameras are allowed in a federal court. That hasn't been approved in any federal court in this country. So you're not going to see cameras, but you'll see sketches. There'll be sketch artists, and he's got to be processed. And so there's an organization called Pretrial Services, which will have to come up with a report and discuss his finances. So, for all those people who are looking at his finances, the different organizations such as whether it's Congress or the District Attorney's Office in Manhattan, he's got to reveal basically everything to Pretrial Service. That will be one of the conditions, and then he'll be released. I can't imagine there would be any sort of bond. Obviously, we know he's not a flight risk and he's not a danger to the community. These are the two standards to determine whether any bail or bond is going to be set in the federal system, and he doesn't meet either standard. So he's going to be ruled.
This part in the comments drove me nuts. Ben. Because the comments in this were like, what do you mean he's got a jet? He could fly. He could leave. People said that. I thought to myself, he's running for president. He's going to flee the country?
Where is he going? You know?
He's running for president.
To Russia. You know?
Even if how are you going to run for president from Russia? I mean, I guess you could, but come on, the guy's running for president. What are you doing? So, I mean, that part, I saw when I saw comments like that, I just saw the emotion. People just wanted you to go. They wanted you so desperate to say, he's done. He's going to jail. He's guilty. He's a terrible guy. He's going under the jail. That's it. They never let him out. And they're gonna arrest his family and put them in jail with him, right? They wanted you to yell that, and you didn't. And boy, they were not happy.
Yeah,
so
we can get to some of the comments if you like. I think they were entertaining. I mean, people going after me, and I got some things on Twitter. I got some, which means to me, when I've gotten that, it's a good thing. I got people personally messaging me, on LinkedIn. They're like, "You're a joke. How you're not a white collar attorney? Why do they let a guy who went to Brooklyn Law School, on TV?" I'm like, well, Brooklyn's a great school, and you know what? A guy who went to Brooklyn Law School gets to teach at Harvard Law School. Right, so the commentary from these people are just it's.
But the
it's
funny
amazing.
part is the commentary is, I think it's hypocritical, and here's my view of it. Right?
Yes,
they're gonna stand there and yell at you and go, "It's not political. It doesn't matter. It's about the law," but then yell at you when you just explain the law. Yeah. You're explaining, hey, this is how the world works. This is what happens. You didn't take a stand. You didn't go and say, that's it, he's going to walk, or they're all evil. You didn't do any of that stuff. You simply stated, right now he's innocent, which is true. You gotta convict him before you can say he's guilty. True. You don't want to say stuff until you see the evidence. True. It's political. True. And they're like, you're a hack. Literally, you didn't even say it, right? They wanted you to say the thing, which tells me if that person was actually on a jury, they've already convicted him.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
The person who yells at you has already convicted Trump. It doesn't matter what somebody says. They could say, here's the evidence. There's an alien who was Trump, and here's the alien. We're bringing him in. This is the alien who pretended to be Trump and did it. They'd be like, nah, put Trump in jail. Wouldn't matter. Wouldn't matter at all.
The reality is the vast majority of jurors will have made up their mind. It's going to be nearly... it's going to be, I shouldn't say nearly impossible, but it will be far more difficult than in any other type of case to get a quote-unquote impartial jury. And there's nothing impartial about a jury. I mean, it's supposed to be a jury, an impartial jury of your peers. And the reality is that the only people that are going to get on this case are those who are either really stupid and they have no clue, or those who lie really well when questioned and can get themselves onto the jury by saying, I can be fair and impartial, right? And
right,
then
yes.
withstand, questions. And those guys, some of those guys, just like I've been, I've fortunately won, the vast majority of my cases that have gone to trial, but, I've never, I've lost,
Sure.
Some cases. And when you look at that, I was like, that guy lied, right?
Yes.
And I should have seen it. We should have done something more. Clearly, that's not what happened. Sometimes we've had the opportunity. And Larry, you've helped me on this, right? I mean, you and I, you've been a jury consultant on multiple cases of mine. One of the cases that we lost about 8 years ago, we spoke to some of the jurors, and
I remember
one woman lied.
Yep.
And said the opposite of what it was, and in that case, I mean, it was yep. crazy. I mean, and we put in an affidavit. You put in an affidavit. We got a hearing, and then the judge was like, "Oh, she didn't really mean it." It's like the case of the juror on the Jeff Epstein's girlfriend's case, Ghislaine Maxwell, who they found out afterwards had been sexually assaulted.
Yep.
And hid that. How do you have that kind of person on the jury?
It's tough. And
the judge found that to be not a problem. That is insanity.
So
that is insanity.
So in this case, how in the world do you get somebody who doesn't have an opinion on Trump? Right? That's your point, right? How can you, when Trump was literally on TV for like 10 years or whatever, he's in rap songs, as you talk, right? He's been president of the United States. So even if you were in a coma for the past 8 years, you still know him from the TV or from something, right? Or from being a real estate mogul or whatever. Like you know him from somewhere, so you have an opinion. I think it's right. It's going to be very challenging.
Most people are going to weed themselves out because they're going to be honest. And I see this, like, we had a jury selection in a case, and a guy that I would have loved to have on the jury in a case defending somebody, who's charged as part of a government sting operation with, money laundering. And he said, I have problems with sting operations. I was like, shut up.
Yes.
I was like, shut up. Don't say that.
I want you on this jury. Yes, absolutely. Understood. All right, let me keep going here. We're almost done.
On his own, but he'll have to report to pretrial, which is fascinating for a former president who has obviously got a Secret Service detail.
Right. Vinoo Varghese, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you.
So I think if you look at that last part, your point was a valid one. This is someone who literally has a Secret Service detail. Are you going to put handcuffs on him? I mean, are you? It seems really weird, this entire thing. But again, you still have to process him. I mean, you can't not process him, right? I mean, you have to process him either way. You have to do that no matter what. But
they didn't do a mugshot. That's what I heard.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah, my understanding is they fingerprinted him but didn't do a mugshot.
Well, I guess it makes sense, right? I mean, it's not like there aren't pictures of him everywhere, right? So, I mean, you know who the guy is. So I guess that kind of makes sense. You could probably do it anyway. I guess that does.
But if I were Trump, I would have wanted that mugshot.
Why?
With that thing and the numbers underneath, and then you could run ads to the attorney. This is my persecution. This is what the government, spoke about. I mean, you've seen Dave Chappelle monologue on Saturday Night Live from last year, and where he talked about Trump. Do you know what I'm talking about, Larry?
Yep, I remember.
And what Chappelle said, and he said to the audience, and think about how brilliant Chappelle is. He's saying to them, you guys live in a bubble. He's telling the Saturday Night Live audience, the people in the audience, and the millions watching worldwide, because he goes, you don't get why people in Ohio, where I'm from, like Trump. And
right.
You're like, and the person in the big city couldn't understand. Trump is rich. He's from New York. How could you like him? Because Trump went on, and Chappelle talks about this and said the system is rigged. And he goes, you know how I know the system is rigged? He goes, because I'm part of that, and I benefit from that system. Right. And he said, Chappelle was like, he's the only guy that ever come out and told the truth about that. And that's why people like him, even though being
I think you're right. So let me now, since we've kind of walked through that issue, tell me what you think are going to be the next steps in this case. What do you think we're going to see next? What does your gut tell you we're now going to see coming up here?
It's just a bunch of procedural things. They're going to have to review the evidence, look for the motions, and then the question is how much of this stuff is going to get out to the general public. Generally, there's going to be what's called a protective order. And what that means is that the defense can only share, the government will release evidence, but the defense can only share it with those assisting in the defense, like forensic accountants, the Larry Sharps of the world, things like that. You're bound by that. And if you violate that, you could get sanctioned, fined, held in criminal contempt. I mean, there's a lot of serious ramifications.
Does your gut tell you that people will do it anyway? Do you think stuff will leak anyway, even though there's actually a chance they might be sanctioned and go to jail?
The DOJ has leaked so much stuff, right? They shouldn't have known. You shouldn't have known a grand jury had been convened. They shouldn't have said that. It's supposed to be a secret proceeding. But yet, somehow, everything's out there, and John Dickerson and others are talking about, the lawyer said this. There's an article in the New York Times yesterday about, Trump's statements to his lawyers and all that stuff. I mean,
All right, so
They're
we're
already
gonna
analyzing stuff. They're analyzing stuff before they've gotten it. So that tells you. Let's take a step back. Let's see what's actually released. What will happen is when the defense lawyers file motions, right, and that's basically requests to the court to challenge evidence, and they will then annex parts of the discovery that can be released to the public. Some of it may be redacted because it cannot be released to the public. So that's when we'll have a much better idea of what's actually the real evidence is.
So do you think that they're going to put this on hold, rush it? I mean, literally next year's the election. Do you think they're going to actually have this guy start trial during the primary season? I mean, what's your gut tell you? What do you think? I mean, I know you don't know, you're not in it, but give me your gut. Do you think they're going to actually do this during the primary season? Do they hold it off? Let me give you my piece where my head is. I think that Democrats want this. They don't want Trump to be taken out. They want him to run wounded. They would love him to have to go through stuff, go through trial prep, all these things while he's running for president. Democrats, I think, would prefer that. Republicans want one of two things: push it off or hammer him and get this thing over with and get him innocent. I think they want fast or after the election, which means if he wins, then they're going to basically drop it. But they're not going to prosecute him while he's president, right? Or Democrats are like, let him get hammered. What's your gut say? What do you think is going to actually happen? What do you think the DOJ actually does?
Well, I'm gonna actually challenge two of the things you just said first.
Please go ahead.
Before I answer your question as to what the DOJ, I can answer your question simply. It's going to proceed, and then
it is.
The judge may set a trial date. My understanding is that there's a trial date set in the Manhattan case. For like early next year. So let me take a step back here. When you say Democrats, you gotta understand. You mean the Democratic people that run the Democratic Party.
Yes, I'm sorry. You're right. I should be
100%
clear.
agree with
yes,
you.
Correct.
The
leadership
majority
of
of Democrats want him to die. Right.
Yes, you're right. I stand corrected. I should have been clearer.
And I think a lot of Republicans want him to die. They just won't admit it. Right?
Right.
And so they want to see him out and go to jail and let somebody else, a DeSantis or somebody else, come up. Right? Chris Christie, whoever the people that have, that aren't,
Right. I get you. You're right. I should have been clearer.
Trumpers. So I think, this case will proceed as a case, and at some point there will be.
So I guess what you're saying is you don't think that the election is going to matter to them.
No, I think that they will move this case, and you'll see it may move faster. That will depend on the motions, but it may move faster than normal criminal cases.
Wow, I'm surprised.
But again, a lot of this depends on Trump and his team, and his resolve and what he wants to get out of it. I mean, because even if, like, let's say a trial happened in early 2024 or later this year, which would be, that would be like on, the case move forward on crack, right? Like, let's say that happened and he's convicted. Well, he may not get sentenced for a long time. Right,
Sure.
He may not get sentenced. And so what they're saying is, the woman in Florida, Judge Cannon, who I think is bad. Of course, the left hates her because she was the one who stopped the mask mandate on airplanes.
Oh, there we go. Yes.
Right? She
so
wrote
by
that
default,
opinion,
she's evil.
And they didn't take an appeal. They just complained about it. But they didn't take an appeal because they knew her appeal was solid. Her decision was absolutely solid. Right?
Got it.
So they're saying, an article in the New York Times this morning, she's not experienced to handle criminal cases. Whatever, man.
Okay.
So, he may not get sentenced. I would imagine Judge Marchand, the judge in the Manhattan case, if that case goes to trial and there's a conviction, which in all likelihood there will be in Manhattan, it's nothing to do with legally sufficient. I don't think their evidence is going to be legally sufficient. And I can say that right now without even having looked at it. Right?
Right.
So
hold on.
Stop it for a second.
Yep. So
that judge here
in
in
Manhattan.
Hold on,
No. Start from that case in Manhattan.
That case in Manhattan with that judge, there is no doubt in my mind, if the trial happens he's convicted, the judge is going to put him in jail right away.
Wow.
Okay? Yeah, he's like, that dude has never left the prosecutor's office, Judge Marchand.
Wow.
Right? He's just
Wow,
a
that's
DA
crazy.
in robes, and he will want to be known as the judge who put Trump in jail. So that's going to pose a problem for Trump. On the federal case, the sentencing can be held, or you can have the sentencing. The judge can sentence him and then stay the sentence pending appeal, which will likely happen in the federal case. But in the state case, I see him, like where I said the case is garbage in Manhattan. The danger of incarceration is far greater in Manhattan than it is in the federal case.
So let me ask a crazy question, just your opinion on this. What happens if he gets convicted, he gets sentenced, or they want to put him in jail, and he just goes, no? Do you think that's a possibility? What's your gut tell you? What does a state government do when the guy goes, no, I'm not going to jail, gets on his jet and goes to Florida?
No, that's not going to happen. What I'm saying is that the jury comes back with a guilty verdict. They're going to put him in handcuffs right there.
Oh, right then and there.
Right there and there.
Got it. Okay. Because you're worried that once again, there has to be sentencing. You think the judge puts him right in jail immediately?
Yep. And it has him in pending sentence. That's what most judges do in Manhattan.
There we go.
They put guys in. There's a conviction. They're putting him in.
That is a totally amazing prediction. I love that. Vin, I got to say thanks for giving me a chunk. You gave me a bunch of time. I appreciate the time you gave me. The insight was amazing. The commentary was good. I appreciate it, man.
Thank you, Larry. Always a pleasure. And I'll talk to you soon.
All right. We'll talk soon. Thank you, everybody, for watching. I appreciate this. I will see you all very soon.